Namaste. Today we are continuing our third lecture on Servlet technology. In previous lectures we have some theory points for Servlet technology. We have seen that what is Servlet technology, working of servlets, we have compared the servlets with applets, and we have also seen the life cycle of the servlet. So now we will implement this life cycle in the implementation of servlets. So before moving to implementation, let us see how to work with servlets. Means there are basic steps which we have to follow for creating servlets. So let us see this. First, create a directory structure for your application. It means whenever we are creating a web applications, we should follow the particular directory structure. It means where we will store the web pages, where we will store the servlet classes, where we will store the different library files, etc. We have to maintain this directory structure for the particular execution of the application. Next, create a servlet. After defining the directory structure, we have defined one place for creating servlets. At that place, we will create a servlet. Then, we have to compile that servlet. Compiling means we will convert that Java file into a class file. Next step is create deployment descriptor for our application. Right? After creating servlet, we will create a deployment descriptor, because deployment descriptor will tell us which servlet will serve which request. Right? For that purpose, we have to create deployment descriptor. Start the server and deploy the application. Right? After creating servlet and deployment descriptor, we have to start the server which is available in our system, which must be a local server. It can be a Tomcat Apache or Glassfish server, etc. We have to deploy our application on that local server. And the last point is access the servlet. After starting the server, we can run our servlet and get the output. So these are the basic steps which we have to follow for creating and executing the servlet. So moving further, we will see the directory structure of the web application. In the root, means the top, we have to write the name of our applications, right? And this will be the main directory, means a folder, in which the subfolders or the subdirectories will be there. There will be subdirectories for the static resources like CSS files, images, etc. or JavaScript files, so on. Next, we will have the different web pages, for example HTML or JSP pages. There will be a subdirectory named webinf. In webinf folder, there will be library folder, web.xml file, and the classes directory. Like in library, there will be inbuilt packages which will be used for creating our servlet classes and the functionality of the servlets. And in the web.xml, it is known as deployment descriptor. There will be some XML elements which will help to find which servlet will serve which request. Right? In classes, we will put the class file of the servlet. Means whenever we run our servlet classes, it will convert it from Java classes to class files. Right? After seeing this directory structure, we will focus on the web.xml. Let us see the different elements of the web.xml file, means the deployment descriptor elements. The first is web app. It represents the whole application, means this will be the root element. Right? These elements are same as HTML elements. Right? This have the starting tag and ending tag too. Then the servlet is sub element of web app and represents the servlet. Servlet tag will come under the web app tag, right? And this represents the servlet. Then the next element is servlet name. Is sub element of servlet represents the name of the servlet, right? Servlet name is come under the servlet and it will represent the name of the servlet, which will be temporarily given by us. Servlet class is sub element of servlet represents the class of the servlet, right? This will represent the class name of the servlet. There is a difference between name and class, right? Name is given by us to that class file of the servlet, right? Means the Java file which we are creating, we are given that name. That will be included in the servlet class, right? And in servlet name, the name is given to that class file. Then the servlet mapping is sub element of web app is used to map the servlet. As we have seen that deployment descriptor is used to map the servlets and their requests. So this tag will be used for mapping that particular terminology. Then URL pattern. URL pattern is sub element of servlet mapping, right? This will used in the servlet mapping. This pattern is used at client side to invoke the servlet. It means whenever we map to servlet and its URL pattern, we will use this element servlet mapping and URL pattern, right? Then we will move to the creating servlets, right? For creating servlets, right, we have the different ways. Before we have seen in different Java examples that whenever we need to create exceptions, threads, we have a particular class from the Java packages, we are extending that class, right? Here we have the same terminology. For creating servlets, we have one interface and two classes. Let us see which are they. First is by implementing servlet interface. The next step is by extending generic servlet class. Third is by extending HTTP servlet class. In first step, we have to implement servlet interface, right? Means we have to implement all the methods which are available in servlet interface. Next step is by extending generic servlet class, in which we need not to override all the methods of generic servlet. And the third is HTTP servlet class. By extending this class, it is not compulsory to override all the methods. We just override whichever methods will be needed. Generally, we will use the HTTP servlet class because most of the request comes under the HTTP protocol, right? So we will start our implementation for creating servlet. We will use the HTTP servlet class. So in today's lecture, we have seen that the servlets directory structure means the web application directory structure, where to create servlet, what are the elements of the web.xml, what are the uses of that elements, right? And then different ways means to create the servlets. In next lecture, we will use these ways for creating the servlet class, and we will also see the Java database connectivity, which is the most important part of the Java language. We will implement this concept into a servlet, right? Thank you.